one section here which I won't talk about now because I think it's going beyond the focus of this presentation. Sure. There's weaknesses in journalism due to the whole structure of the media industry. Right? Now what am I talking about? There's the ownership of the media and its overall policies that they have in place. To be honest, I don't think that they give potential, they allow journalists to explore their full potential as journalists. And I wrote an article some years ago on the evils of monopoly in the television industry. Well, for 2-3 years afterwards, that particular television company, shut me out of all interviews and any policy areas. I'd even ring them and say, hey, look, this is very important, can you please run a story in this, How dare you criticize us for not serving the interests of this country, right? So there's a problem there about the structure of ownership of media and all that, and the overall policies they have, the staffing policies, the salary structures. I mean, I'm appalled at the low salaries which are given to journalists out there. A few people at the top may be given sort of middle-level salaries, but even at the top, those salaries would probably compare to what our junior lecturers at the university get. And what senior journalists in the media get are probably, in fact, less than what our secretaries, in our university are paid. And so, there's a real problem. There's a problem with the Media Council, I believe, that they really have failed in strengthening good journalism. And I look at the weaknesses, for example, in the media award system, right? Is there really a serious attempt to try and differentiate between the different kind of journalists you have in the print media, in the visual media, in the radio media and all that? Is an attempt to in fact focus on specialisms which they should focus on, which they should encourage by giving special awards and things every year? There's no attempt to do that. And I think there's a bit of an anti-intellectual bias that's there in the media, where the people at the top, basically their idea is if a journalism graduate comes out and actually is trying to do new things in their industry, there's no idea that, let's encourage this. In fact, the first thing is, you're getting too smart for your boots or something. What do you think, And the usual reaction actually is to in fact sideline the creative journalist in such a way that eventually the person, this kind of stuff that's going on over there, I suspect, what could happen, from your point of view, is you need to in fact, map out a solid program of research where you document what is actually happening in all these areas that I'm talking about and some others as well. Shall I, I mean, I don't know whether in fact you have got a summary paper, for example, of the structure of salaries paid to journalists in the media industry, right? I think if you compare this with what is paid in government and other statutory organizations, it would be a very, very revealing thing. Have you done a real analysis, of the kinds of activities of the Media Council over the years, and whether these, meet with your ideas about what you would do if you yourself were the chairperson of the Media Council? How would you make sure that all the different, aspects of good journalism are encouraged through, annual awards and all that? You'd look at actually the kinds of program policies that the different media have, the television, the radio, and so on. One very famous person is absolutely mad with me for the last 10-15 years. When I gave a lecture, in one of the series that's in the memory of his father, and I said, gee, your radio station, should be the last one to talk about development. Your idea of giving national news, is one minute of news, with 59 minutes of irrelevant rubbish music, played from, with obscene stuff, from some, source whatever. This is not how you educate the public into all the terrible things that are going on in the country, the times of coups and military coups and crisis and all that. Surely you've got to have a bit more of a serious attention to informing our public. Well, doesn't pay to criticize people, strong people in the media. But these are things, in fact, where you need good, strong empirical analysis. Believe you me, saying one thing off the top of your head is one, right? I suspect, for example, that you journalism students, right, have not seen a detailed analysis of the actual content, for example, of newspapers. Compare them, right? What percentage is devoted to this, and this, and this? A detailed analysis of the time output of radio stations, different radio stations. What percentage of the time do they devote to serious news, local news, international news, gender issues, rural development areas? Of course, entertainment as well, right? But until you have hard facts in front of you, you can't go around and tell, media owners and all, well, this is what you're doing. You've got 99% entertainment and 1%, on development issues. You can't go to a television station and say, we prove a little bit, that, hey, there's people in this country, actually, they don't read newspapers, here is everybody tuned into a television station. And what proportion of your news actually is in Fiji Hindi, which is what, Indo-Fijians understand if they don't understand English? What percentage of your news is in Fijian? And I made this criticism at the time of the 2000 coups, where I said, all these rumors are circulating in the country about, in Fijian, about what's going on in the country, etc., including horrible, horrible rumors. And you're still giving only one minute of news in indigenous Fijian language. I said, this is absolutely criminal. Well, this is 5 years on, 8 years on, you still only have 1 minute of news in the Fijian language. Yeah? That's supposed to be a company which is owned, 51% by Asana Holdings, as they tell us, every night, in advertisements. 1 minute of news in the indigenous language. And of course, they have got a few more programs in indigenous Fijian language, but nothing in Fiji Hindi, for example, right? And it's supposed to be serving the public. So, there are problems with industry ownership and structure and management and the policies at which they operate. There's probably serious problems about the boards of these companies and whether the boards actually exercise any influence whatsoever, or whether profit maximizing accountants and financial controllers determine everything, including program content, bugger their social and development objectives. Now, these are things that you journalist students can actually go and do research on, write major papers on and so on, and then you'll be able to arm your journalist lecturers and so on to go to media councils or whatever and say, look, we'd like to see some progress on this front. 3 years from now, when a new set of journalism students come and do this research again, hopefully we're going to find something better. Okay? So let me stop there. And
but I had one of the opening question that I think I have is where you were saying that there is an anti-intellectual attitude, which I agree with, because even when I talk to my students, I think they've been actually trained to just write and listen to the editor, and not trained to think for themselves, which is very important. But unless you teach them. For that, journalists have to read themselves first and have to develop their own voice, which I think is very important. But that is not encouraged in the schools here. That's one of the basic problems, not just in journalism schools, but even in schools.
Yeah. Well, the intellectual theme that I sort of detect out there, in the media, is partly because of the fact that senior people, in the media themselves feel sometimes, that because they themselves don't have the formal qualification, and then here's a young person coming from your journalism school has got a degree or a diploma in journalism, and they feel threatened. And quite often the new graduate has got ideas, which they don't have. And unfortunately, it is the case that it requires people with vision and broad tolerance and generosity of spirit to be able to accept, that when new ideas come through, you should give them a fair go and listen to them, rather than, in fact, not encouraging them. I actually think, in fact, that one of the reasons why there's two reasons probably. The media, there's been a recent report on the media, it's a lot of criticisms and all that. But there's two sides, to the media. One is when they maintain low salaries for the journalists, right? Of course, they make bigger profits. I suspect if you compare the profits of a newspaper in Fiji with a newspaper in Sydney or Melbourne, you'll find that per asset or per staff involved, they make far more money here in Fiji than they do in Sydney or in Brisbane or in Auckland, right? But the other side also is that quite often the media don't want journalists, who rock the boat, who are basically raising issues which may appear contentious. You've got to remember, in the end, that media, they depend for their revenue on advertisers. The advertisers are usually the big corporate clients and all that. And if a journalist goes out there and digs up something which in fact is perceived by some big advertiser as against me, then that media is not going to encourage that. And we have a sad situation where in fact there is cross-media ownership by some very, very large corporate clients. And they're not going to encourage journalists to go out there and do investigative journalism, which in fact throws a little bit of a bad light and negative, and may have negative consequences on some clients.